Well, hello, family. Welcome to our live stream. I got a couple special guests for you, very special guests. I got my good friend Jenny Mire from the Rooted Truth podcast, and I also have Lori from Remnant Rising on Instagram, and we're going to talk about the mark of the beast. If it came and went. Welcome to the live stream, Jenny and Lori. How you guys doing?
Doing
Thanks for
well.
having
Thanks for
us.
having us.
Of course, it was a long time coming. I said I've done a little bit. I've talked with you, Lori, a little bit when I've done members only stuff on Jenny's, but you've never been on my podcast. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks.
So first off, why don't you guys just tell us a little bit about yourselves or like where they can find you, while people are here checking in.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Jenny. JT, I think we met on Instagram. Has it been a
Mhm.
few years? Like maybe like 3, 4 years by now?
We did our the first time I think we did a podcast. I didn't have any equipment. It sounded like absolute
Yeah.
garbage because that was probably like the summer of 2022. So like I had only been making
Yeah.
content for probably 6, 7 months or something like that. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I had short hair then too.
Yeah,
That was
you
before I
did.
even
You
started
did.
growing it.
Yeah. So I have the Rooted Truth podcast. That's been around since 2021. Lori and I write our studies together with the Rooted Truth. We host live studies. We have membership. All the things just digging into biblical truth.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah. You guys can find me on Instagram, Remnant Rising 5.0. Um, but yeah, we've been just starting at square one for a lot of things and what we were told versus what the Bible really says and peeling back the layers. So it's been really good the past few years. This journey that we've been on has been really amazing. And it's been really fun to meet the like minded people. And, when you find your people, it's fun. So
Mm-hmm.
we love these kind of conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that seems like my journey, a lot of people in the audience today's journey has been either they have a background in the church or they have no
Mhm.
background in the church and they kind of
Mhm.
came to some of these conclusions through like the conspiracies. But I think lots of us had probably at least since I don't know the last 5 years trying
Mhm.
to unlearn some of the things we thought we knew
Yep.
in order to probably see clearly. Because I think that's definitely been my journey through the scriptures again, reading it over and over again, and like it's like you don't even realize all the stuff that the biases you're reading into the text. So you're trying to make it say what everyone's told you it says. And then one day you're just like, it really doesn't say that. I've read this like 4 times. It does not say that at all. And then you have
Mhm.
to like continue to search and seek. And praise
Mhm.
God that He's given us eyes to see some things that we were once
Yeah.
blind to.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you a question. Of course, this is something that obviously you guys probably can relate to. Is that so? As you have been kind of unlearning and learning what we believe to be true at this point, how much pushback do you guys get from like the people who followed you from the times you were
Mhm.
talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, the mark of the beast is coming. Now we're saying it
Mm-hmm.
already came, and the
Yeah.
Antichrist, the third temple, and all that stuff. Have you guys had? Has your audience come along with you, or is a lot of people have they pushed back?
Mhm.
I would probably say, as far as audience goes, I would say more than half have dug in with us.
Mhm.
Like, okay, let's look at this. Let's dig in. But that's not to say that we haven't lost a ton of
Yeah.
people too,
Yeah.
and even close friends that don't agree, that cannot get over the fact that we disagree with eschatology.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've lost some friends along the way, which is sad because it's not a salvation issue, right? It's I don't know. So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
How about you, Lori? You have experienced about the same?
Yeah, same sort of thing. Like, we've had a lot of people that have fully come on this journey with us. They're
Mhm.
understanding the same things we are because they take basically like our starting points and they still do the research and study for themselves. It's not just like believing what we say just because
Yeah.
we said it. They go do the study and prayer and research for themselves as well. And so I'd say the people that are in our community obviously have come along board. Um,
Mhm.
as far as just the number of people of followers on our pages, there's still always pushback. Like I just got lit up a few months ago for Revelation. And I was like, this is hilarious. I shared all this
Yeah.
last year. Like I even put in my caption, like, hey, like saving this as a post because like it's in my highlight. It wasn't new information, but there's just so much cognitive dissonance still. There's still so much tied to the belief of what they've been taught that like if that goes away then what now. And so where we went on our journey was like it was really important for us to start at the beginning and what does that look like and ask the questions of okay, well if you believe this, why, and where does that come
Mhm.
from, where does that belief come from, and let's look at that first before we get into anything else,
Mhm.
because once you
Mhm.
do that, I mean
Yeah.
it, the answers take care of themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what I want to touch on one thing you said, Jenny, was that I've had to deal with that a lot. Is that some people would say that if you say you believe that the Antichrist already came, you say that there's no third temple, you say that we're not concerned as much about the mark of the beast anymore. People will start using the H word. They'll say you're a heretic.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
funny part about it is, it's like there's so many people who are just ignorant to a lot of things because partial preterism is not a heretical position. It's like a widely accepted position by the church.
Yep.
And like I
Yep.
think in this community, we like to say we believe we're in the little season. So we don't really, some people don't like that title, but I mean, I understand that partial preterism just means you believe that some prophecies have been filled, not all
Yeah.
of them. And so we're
Yeah.
not on the level of the full preterist, but even still, it's like I still see some people that they don't quite get that. I think it's because I think there's a very narrow view in what you'd call maybe like the Protestant church,
Mhm.
non-denominational. They
Mhm.
think that their view is the main
Mhm.
accepted view, but they don't
Mhm.
realize that there's Christians all over the world that don't share that view,
Mhm.
who still have faith in Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
and they still believe in salvation like we believe it. And I do think it's maybe like that. Of course, in America, they believe they're the Church of Philadelphia. They're going to get
Mhm.
raptured soon,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stop bumming me out by saying I'm not.
Mhm.
But they don't
Mhm.
realize that that's not the majority position. That's not the majority position for Christianity, the Christian church, for like since Jesus was here.
Yeah.
But they think that it is, and I think that it's just like, yeah, I think that there's a lot of ignorance there. But on the positive side, I have noticed too in this community that because I was like big time end times guy when I first started on my journey
Mhm.
here, that I've had when I turned some people off when we first started talking about it. But I've had a lot of testimonies about people saying,
Mhm.
I was really mad at you.
Mhm.
But then I started to read it again and I
Mhm.
started to see what you were saying. And then
Yeah.
they're back. And I think it's praise God for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so cool though. But it's true, like our Western mindset is so different than the rest of the world. And that's why we really took a step back and we're like, what's the cultural background here? What is the historical background? How does this all line up? And so being able to understand what they understood in the first century made all the difference.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I guess it's that kind of the like Michael Heiser said, the
Hmm.
Bible was written for us, but not to us. And like so understanding
Yep.
the mindset of the people, understanding the people who Jesus is talking about, understanding who the letters are written to, what's going on at the same time. That I think that's important. So do you guys want to you wanted to start off, Jenny, maybe tell us a little bit about like maybe let's just get into maybe just start with like the Daniel prophecies in the 70
Yeah.
weeks because I think that was a very pivotal point for me was when I was
Mhm.
reading that
Mhm.
and I was like, so
Mhm.
we're waiting on a third temple
Mhm.
so an antichrist can go in there so they can start sacrificing only for them to stop sacrificing. And that's when I was like, they haven't sacrificed for what we're told is 2000
Yeah.
years. So that's sort of weird that
Yeah.
like they have to start just so they can stop. So why don't you break down
Yeah.
what the seven Daniel 9 and the 70-week prophecy was about?
Yeah. Essentially, this is the starting point, I think, for both
Mhm.
Lori and I when we were on this journey together, starting to dig in, just first questioning, like, okay, where did the 7-year tribulation come from? And I'm pretty sure we've talked about this on your podcast. I know we have on mine a lot, but where did you have to ask yourself, if you believe that there's a 7-year tribulation, that there's a one-man antichrist, that you do have to have a third temple, where does that prophecy, and I do it in quotes, come from? And so we started to dig in. That comes from Daniel 9, the last 4 verses of Daniel 9. Essentially, Daniel's praying for his people. They're in Babylon at the time. And he's saying, like, hey, the 70 years that were prophesied by Jeremiah are almost up. Like, what's to come of my people? And so Gabriel, the angel, comes and gives him this prophecy known as Daniel's 70 weeks. And a week, in that prophecy, I would say almost every scholar I've ever read, probably all of them that I've ever read, agree that 1 week is 7 years. That's what it's considered. So it's essentially a 490-year prophecy. Now, where it gets tricky is that last week or last 7 years, they say that the prophecy stopped when the Messiah came, because the prophecy is about the Messiah coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about. They'll agree on that until that last 7 years. The dispensational camp says, well, no, that didn't happen. Like, we're still waiting for some future, the Daniel's 70th week to be fulfilled in the future. And that's the 7-year tribulation. And that's where that comes from. But when you're digging in, you're looking at it, you're looking at the grammar of it all. It's not talking about a one-man antichrist where it says that he will make like a peace agreement and
He will
a
confirm a
covenant with
covenant.
many. And when you're looking at it for what it is, what it's talking about in context, it's talking about the new covenant that God is going to make with his people. What Jesus
Right.
did, and he was
That's the
cut
peace.
off.
That's the peace deal
Yes.
with many. It's not
Yes.
the Antichrist making
No.
a deal with many.
No.
Because not
And it doesn't
once
even
does it
say
ever
peace
say
agreement, right?
anything about an antichrist. It's
Yeah.
talking about Jesus the whole time. And then verse 27, they're like, just kidding. It's now the antichrist. And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you were
That's
never
interesting.
taught that, you would never assume that.
Yeah, that's interesting because it is kind of like that. The futurists will look at, they'll read Daniel's 70 weeks and think it's about the Antichrist, and it's
Yeah.
like it's almost like they're leaping over the fact that how big a deal it was that Jesus was going to show up.
Yeah.
But then because it's always like, oh, well, when Jesus comes back, he's going to be like this though. So they're still waiting for Jesus to show up, even though he did show up right on time, right when the prophecy said he would show up. And so that's interesting because so would your conclusion be that the reason they say that there's this stopping point is because they just don't believe the other things have happened, or is there any biblical reason that they could say, oh well, there's a reason why there is a 2,000-year gap between week 69 and week 70?
Well, I guess the question is, like, how deep do you wanna go into it of why they did this? Because I fully believe it was a work of the enemy in the 1800s using a Jesuit priest, Emmanuel Lacunza. You've had Jeremy Sladen on, right? Talking to you
I've talked
guys?
to him. Yeah, I've talked to him a
Okay.
few times. Yeah.
He's done a lot, way more research than we have on that, of just the origins of this, dispensational theology. And so I believe it was a work of the enemy because it keeps your eyes on, like, oh, well, we have to do this, we have to do this. And it just changes your perspective of, no, we're supposed to grow the kingdom. Like, our commission is to grow the kingdom, not to be looking out for us to get raptured or anything. And so I personally think it was a work of the enemy of just switching that one little thing and making it fit in Matthew 24. Like, all this destruction hasn't happened yet. We're still waiting for this great tribulation, all these things to happen. So I think it was the devil.
No, I agree. I did another podcast the other day, and I was saying that it's kind of interesting to think. And my buddy Ricardo, he's the one who kind of like it's like almost the most simple thing in Matthew 24 that it's easy to miss. It starts with the apostles talking about the temple. Jesus says it's going to be destroyed, and then they asked him when, and then they asked what the signs will be, and of course, then they mentioned his coming, and the end of the world, or the end of the age. But if you read Luke 21 and you also read Mark 13, they literally just, what are the signs of the temple destruction going to be? So then you think about it. Then he lists the signs that are going to be precede the temple destruction. So if you look at it, and then so of course Jesus obviously wraps everything up with after all these things, I'll be coming. And then he says, before this generation passes away, all these things will come to pass.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really think about it, so what we're taught by the mainstream church is that the temple was destroyed, the apostles were martyred, there was wars, there was famines, there was earthquakes. The only thing that didn't happen was Jesus coming back. So when Luke 21, when Jesus says, when you see all these things, look up, your redemption draws nigh. So like, what would your perspective be if you were the early church and you got to experience all the bad things he said were going to happen, but you didn't get to experience your redemption?
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know what I mean? Like that should make you upset, because it's like, how would Christianity have spread like it did if Jesus was specifically talking to them? All the apostles are writing the same thing. This is coming. It's the last hour. The end of all things is at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says, don't get married because the end of the world's coming. And then they experience all the worst persecution of the church, but there was no redemption at the end of that.
Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
pretty messed up.
I think essentially, like, it's taking back to Daniel 9, taking that out of context, and so these people who hold to this theology, this eschatology, they're waiting for this third temple to be built, because they're like, wait a second, there is no third temple for somebody to stand up and make a covenant in. And we also have to then look at the New Testament. Who is the third temple? We are.
Yeah.
It is
Right.
clear as day. We are the third temple. And so I was just reading some of the live comments about the, like, well, when is the third temple? Has it been built and destroyed yet? We are the third. We are the final temple.
Yeah.
Like, there will not be another temple.
Well, and so back to what you were saying about, Lakunza and all of that sort of stuff. Like, what I've always said too is that this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy on their end.
Mhm.
They want you to believe these things are supposed to happen biblically. They want you to believe that this is the prophecy that's to come. And so then when it gets, quote, fulfilled and you start seeing different things, you're like, oh my gosh, it's coming to pass. When in reality, they're the ones orchestrating everything and making it happen. They are self-fulfilling their own prophecies of what they want to happen. But it, just like Jenny said, that view is all about the Antichrist. It's not about Jesus. It's not about our commission. It's not about growing the kingdom. And you lose that when all you're focused on is this horrific upcoming of 7-year tribulation and this one man antichrist that's going to rule the world.
Mhm.
Your perspective is so entirely different.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that you think it'd make a passive church, because everyone
100%.
would be sitting on their hands and saying, well, it's all
Yep.
supposed to go to hell, so but at
100%.
least I'll be gone.
Yep.
And so you have one group that's really passive, and then you have like the Greg Locks of the world saying, like, literally trying to cheer on a third temple.
Yep.
And you got people in Texas sending red cows over there to potentially start the cleansing process to create a temple. And they think this is a good thing. But I thought was another good point was somebody made was that, because they quote, is it Second Thessalonians 2, when it says that the man of sin is going to enter the temple of God. And so if this temple is literally just built to fulfill this one prophecy of this man of sin going in there, you can't call it the temple of God, because as Jenny rightly pointed out, that Jesus is the cornerstone of the new temple, the third temple, that we are living stones that build this temple, because we are the temple of the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
So that that would be contradictory to say that this, whatever they would build on the Temple Mount, potentially, that it would be could be called the temple of God.
Yep.
They
Totally.
don't even believe. And that's like a whole nother separate topic too. But if you, Jesus says, like, if you don't honor me, like, if you don't honor the Son, you don't honor the Father. And they don't believe in Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, that gets into like, are
Whole
they
other thing.
really true Israel? And I think that, I mean, you could just read
Whole other thing.
what Paul wrote. You could read what Paul wrote in Galatians and what he wrote
Mhm.
and what Romans
Mhm.
9, when he was saying like not everyone who descended from Israel is
Mhm.
of Israel. And he said, the true Israel of God, who are the ones who believe in the promises of Isaac. So, yeah, it's like it's the most like the clear thing, and I think that that's maybe where people really get disconnected is because Jesus is talking about heavenly things and spiritual concepts about like
Yeah.
Mhm.
the kingdom of heaven
Yep.
and like even he talks about. I mean, you might say the first third temple is Jesus because he says you'll tear
Mhm.
this temple down and I'm going to raise it back up in 3 days. So
Well, yeah,
he's
he's the head though. He's the head of the
Yeah.
church, so he is.
yeah, so I think that's why he's even saying like that when he's talking about how the kingdom is not going to come in ways that can be observed, and he's like
Mhm.
the kingdom's in the midst of you, and he's talking about
Mhm.
himself filled with the Holy Spirit. I'm
Yeah.
going to be coming in. You'll see me coming in my kingdom. So what is he talking like? You know, what I mean, it's like literally is he talking about a like a
Mhm.
castle in the sky coming down, or is he talking
Mhm.
about himself resurrected, filled with the Holy Spirit coming down with great power on the clouds? I think it's interesting that like that is why that the Jews at the time rejected him is because they want the same kingdom that the people now want.
Mhm.
They're like, well,
Oh,
where's the
yeah.
physical one? We're like, well, when do
Yep.
we get to go
Yep.
rule this place?
Yep.
And Jesus
Oh,
is saying, it's not like that.
Yep. Absolutely.
they were expecting Jesus to come in an earthly kingdom and overthrow the Roman government.
Mhm.
And
That's what they were looking for.
that's what people still expect.
Yeah.
They expected like, oh, this place is so bad, Jesus is going to come back, and then we're never going to die. We're going to get resurrected. We're going to come right back down, and then we're going to rule here. And
Mhm.
it seems like that is a good way the devil could trick people because
Mhm.
why wouldn't people want to believe that?
No, but it's all spiritual, just like you said.
Yep.
He's talking like spiritually minded.
Yep.
So we have to be spiritually minded as well. But it doesn't mean that some of this stuff didn't happen physically in the first century within that generation, because it did. He said all the blood of the saints and the prophets
Mhm.
is on this generation. That meant
Mhm.
40 years. We believe that he was crucified and resurrected in 30 AD, and a generation biblically was 40 years. So 40 years later, what happened?
Yep.
Everything they knew, the temple was the embodiment of the old covenant they were rejecting the new covenant in Jesus. Everything they knew came crashing down. And so during this time, getting to like the topic of the mark of the beast, that's when this happened. And there's historical documents like Josephus writes about it, which that part just amazes me that people can't like look at that and just really be like, okay, yeah, like this is
Mhm.
documented by a historian in the first century who was not a believer. He
Yeah.
was not a Christian. He was a Jew, but he documented everything that happens. And so it's just amazing once you start to look at different areas and different aspects rather than just what we are taught
Mhm.
in the modern day Protestant non denominational church, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is funny. I've made that point where it's just like that people can look at the first century church and they could say, oh, well, that was really unfortunate what happened to them, but the
Yep.
great tribulation is going to be really bad. And you're like,
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
isn't it sort of weird that
Exactly.
that like we're taught that all these apostles died at that time, save
Mhm.
John. But I mean, again, I don't know if there's that many credible historical accounts that we know what really happened with all the apostles. We were just
Mhm.
told that all of them except for John were martyred. But yeah, like
Mhm.
why don't you get into because that's a question we often get asked is okay, so if this happened, what was the mark of the beast? What was
Yeah.
what did you find in your research?
Well, how about we start out like what are the different like views of the mark of the
Oh, sure.
beast? And so the first one is kind of what we've been talking about. This futuristic view is that it's a literal mark on the
Mhm.
hand or the forehead, and it could be anything from a chip being implanted. Sorry if that gets you taken off of YouTube. I don't know what's censored nowadays. A digital mark or any other thing. And in the past, I mean, when barcodes came out, people
Mhm.
thought barcodes were the mark of the beast.
Mhm.
Credit cards,
Or social security numbers,
yes,
right?
social security numbers, credit
Yeah.
cards, all of this stuff at one point or another has been thought to be the mark of the beast. So that's the futuristic view. But as you can see, it keeps changing. Like the
Mhm.
goalpost keeps going out, moving it out a little bit further. Then there are some that actually believe that this is a spiritual mark of allegiance. And this is kind of what I held to prior to us digging in, which will be the last one that we talk about. But the spiritual mark of allegiance to like the beast, or beast system. And I mean, a lot of people talk about like a beast system nowadays happening that's running the world. And yeah, there's still evil out there running a lot of things. But this would be like if you don't choose God, like if you don't choose them, or if how do we put that, Lori? Like if you don't choose them, like there's a choice either way.
Yeah, if you
So
don't choose Jesus, you've already chosen
yeah, like
Yeah,
because
I
you're
agree with that.
automatically on the other side.
yeah. And a lot of people, a lot in the historical camp, as far as like a historical eschatology, believe that it would be worshiping and revering the Pope.
Mhm.
And obviously, a lot has gone down in the last week with the Pope, but there's a big group of people that believe that that is the mark of the beast, is worshiping the Pope. Now, where we landed after studying all the different views is more of like this partial preterist. This would be considered a preterist view of the mark of the beast, saying that it has already happened, but that it was fulfilled in the first century with Nero and the other Caesars who represented Rome, which was the beast,
Hmm.
and that the Jews had to take in order to buy or sell. And so we came across some really cool documentation that Josephus talked about with what really happened in the first century. So that kind of breaks down like the different views. And I may be missing one, but that's in general.
No, that's a good summary. I want to touch on one thing real quick before you get to continue. Is that you said the Rome is the beast? So some people
Mhm.
think that the Antichrist is the beast. There's a beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, and I think Apollyon. It's been my belief
Mhm.
that that entity possesses the kings of Rome, the emperors of
Mhm.
Rome, and then there you kind of have your, call him your Antichrist if you want. But the
Mhm.
beast has 7 heads. There's 7 mountains. Rome was known as the city on
Mhm.
7 hills.
Yeah.
And what you said earlier about how that Jesus told the Pharisees that all the innocent blood on the earth was going
Mhm.
to be put on their generation. So I think if you, I want to say it's might be Revelation chapter 17. It says when the the whore is destroyed by the beast, burned with fire, it says that
Mhm.
all the innocent blood on the earth was found in her.
Hmm.
So, I mean, to me, it's like you can't have it, like you cannot have a future prophecy about all the innocent blood in the earth if Jesus said it was going to be on them, and then
Mhm.
it says later in the book of Revelation, all the innocent, because it's all. So
Mhm.
they were put on there, and so yeah, Josephus writes about the Jewish-Roman War that 42 months, the times in half at times,
Mhm.
1,260 days. Rome razed Jerusalem to the ground, destroyed the temple, burned it with fire. I think it's really clear. That's why when some people try to say, "Oh, it's the Vatican is the whore of Babylon," or "The
Yeah.
Vatican's the
Yeah.
beast," it's like,
Yeah.
no. It's like it's very clear at the time. It's like they're talking about
Hmm.
the
Mhm.
empire is the beast, just like
Mhm.
it says in Daniel 4. Was it Daniel 4?
Daniel 7. Daniel
Daniel
7.
7
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Rome is the fourth beast. It's
Hmm.
Mhm.
terrifying with the iron teeth, and it's
Hmm.
different than the other
Yeah.
beasts. And then yeah, in the whore, read your Old Testament. You can tell who the harlot is. Who's the one who's
Mhm.
unfaithful to God?
Man,
It's the only
that
one.
that one right
Only one.
there was eye-opening once you read it for what it is,
Yeah.
and the pushback that we got
Oh, yeah.
from saying that,
Yeah.
like who the Mystery Babylon, who the harlot is,
Yeah.
but it makes sense. The thing is, with reading Revelation, you have to know the Old Testament symbolism.
Yeah.
You have to know um, all of it. What does it mean coming on the clouds, right? That
Yeah.
means
Mhm.
coming in judgment on a nation. Like
Right.
there's
Mhm.
so much. So yeah, that one is good.
Yeah. We
Yeah. So
always
why
say
don't
that
you?
Daniel is like part one and Revelation is part two because it just kind of continues. And so you have to know those things from Daniel on who the beast is so that when you read it again in Revelation, you're like, oh, I already know this because it came from Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another important thing to note is that you also had the vision of the Nebuchadnezzar statue,
Hmm.
and so you have all these empires that leads up to the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
and then a stone that's
Mhm.
not carved by human hands comes out of a mountain and destroys all of them.
Yep.
And then the kingdom of God is established forever.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
And so those
when was that
10
fourth beast destroyed, and when was the kingdom of God established forever?
well, so those 10 toes are the 10 provinces that Rome got split into. And that is the literal time period that Jesus comes in. Jenny, help me with the dates. Is it 27 BC to 14 AD?
I
But
believe.
Jesus comes in 3 BC in that time period, and he's the one that shatters all that. He sets up his kingdom. His kingdom came when he did. He came to show us what it was. And so um we know from that 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 stone grows into a mountain that fills the entire earth, and that is us. That is believers. We grow to fill the entire earth, and that's part of what we just really want believers to understand, is that you're not waiting to be swept away. You have a commission and you have a calling, and it's to fill the earth. It's the mustard seed, it's the
Mhm.
leaven that fills the bread. We
Yeah.
fill the whole earth. And so that's why we just love Daniel 2 so much, and that visual of what happens, because his kingdom comes and it
Yeah.
literally starts growing and it will never end.
Yeah.
It won't stop
Amen.
growing.
Yeah.
Amen. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. So what was the mark of the beast?
Well, I want to read a passage. I have the Welton one pulled up, Jenny, that we have. And
Mhm.
so we have to remember that at this time there was one currency, it was the Roman currency, and the Christians were rejected from the markets because they didn't bow down in the imperial court of Caesar. So the Jews had set up their own little system. They like had exemptions for things. They didn't have to do all the things, but now that there were Christians saying they also wanted exemptions, the Jews didn't like that. And they were like, no, we're the only ones that get these. And so the Jews actually were the first ones to cause a lot of problems for the Christians. So since they didn't bow down to the imperial court of Caesar, which was like the literal altar of Nero, or Apollo, if you want to look at it that way too,
Mhm.
they couldn't live their lives normally because they couldn't buy or sell in the market. And so Jonathan Welton, this is his quote. He says, "It's important to note that in the ancient culture of Rome, the public market was the main source of trade and retail. For people to enter the public market, they had to pass through the main gate. It was required of all who entered the main gate to pay homage to the idol of the emperor. Once homage was paid, ashes were placed on the hand or on the forehead of the individual, and then they were allowed to pass through the gates and buy and sell merchandise. This was called taking the mark. The parallels between this and the mark of the beast are stunning."
Yeah.
And so when you realize they literally had ashes placed on them, it was a cognitive choice that they had to make. Am I going to enter the market? Am I going to bow down to Caesar? Am I going to worship and put you before Christ? Okay, you get the mark. You can go buy and sell.
Wait a
Mhm.
minute. So is this was like this literally something? So what was the ash? Where did the ashes come from? Did they like burn on some kind of altar or something like that? Is what like how did that happen? Like where did the ashes come from that you got smeared with?
Probably they were offering sacrifices
Yeah.
in front of the statue to Nero. And I mean, he committed suicide in 68. So
Mhm.
the emperor's up till 70, until Jerusalem was totally ransacked. So yeah, I mean, it was also recorded by Josephus that
Mhm.
during this time, so between like 66 to 70 AD, that hundreds of thousands of Jews were taken captive by Rome, and those that they took captive, they actually branded with the name Caesar. So there's also a group of
Yeah.
people that say, well, that's the mark of the beast because they were branded. Um, I tend to think more of like it was a choice to take the mark to buy or sell. But I mean, a lot went down during that time that is not talked about
Yeah.
in our day.
Yeah,
Well, and
that's
there was
amazing.
something
I mean,
else.
well, that seems like because people have always wondered like there's this component of worship that goes with the
Mhm.
mark, and that's why it's like because they don't take the mark and they don't worship, and so people have always wondered
Mhm.
like if it was literally just a microchip in your hand, well, how does that
Yeah.
Mhm.
devolve into worship?
Yeah.
But if there was like literally they were doing some sacrifice at the
Mhm.
market and then they were smearing this stuff on your hand or your forehead, that I mean, that
Mhm.
seems like you're Almost I got vibes of like in Numbers when it talks about them unknowingly worshiping Baal of Peor because they were taking part in this like pagan fertility sex fest or something like that,
Mhm.
and they didn't realize that they were doing that,
Mhm.
but their actions said otherwise, that they
Mhm.
took part in that. And that would be, I mean, I think that that fits really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well, it
and
fits the timeline too.
100%. And the other thing that Jenny and I learned, um, the hand, the mark on the hand being like an action that you're doing or a
Mhm.
coercion of something, and then the forehead being like your cognitive decision. And so that
Is that from Deuteronomy?
hmm,
I believe, because I
Um,
know that there's verses about that. Yeah, like your
yeah.
hand is your action, your forehead is what you think.
yeah, it stems from that, but yeah,
Mhm.
my church taught on Revelation a while back, and so that's the first time that I had heard one of my pastors say that, like, your hand is your action. It's like not necessarily your choice, but you're doing or you're being pulled to do it. Like you're coerced to do it. Whereas on your forehead, it's your choice. You are the one that's making the choice to do it. So,
And that's why we always thought it was so cool too that you're sealed. Like there's a seal on your forehead and it was your choice. You're sealed by the spirit.
mhm.
Right, and nobody thinks that's a physical mark. They believe
Yep.
that's,
Yep.
I mean, I've always believed it. I think it's in Ephesians when it talks about being sealed with the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
makes sense that if God's sending angels and or he's telling the demonic entities, do not torment these people who are sealed with my mark,
Mhm.
Yep.
it would not need to be physical. It would be a spiritual thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I think, like, it is a spiritual kingdom. We are living in a spiritual kingdom, and, that's this happened, though, like, when you dig into Revelation, you look at the stuff that happened in the 1st century, it does line up. It's talking
Mhm.
about that 3.5-year Roman-Jewish war of 66 to 70 AD, and after that, I believe and I know that, JT, we've talked before when I came on your podcast, we held a little bit different beliefs, like,
Mhm.
of where it is to go, I think, but I believe that Revelation 21 and 22 is talking about the new covenant kingdom, spiritual kingdom. And I do believe eventually we will go back to Eden, the original state that God had intended.
Mhm.
But I believe it is a spiritual kingdom, and our goal is to grow that kingdom. The stone that comes in Daniel 2 that does take out that statue and
Mhm.
those kings of those days grows to a mountain to fill the whole earth. And that's the part that most people leave out. That
Mhm.
mountain is the church that fills the whole earth. The earth isn't gonna be burned up. Um, and that's a whole I mean, that's another topic, but that's translation error in Peter where it says that the elements will melt with fire. That's translation error. That's talking about the temple. And so if you get into this temple language, they called, so first off, the temple was the very embodiment of the old covenant. They called the temple heaven and earth. So you have the holy place which is where God's spirit dwelt, right? His presence was, the priest could only enter once a year. That was considered heaven to them. Earth was the holy place where the table of showbread, all of that was, and then the outer courts was known as the sea, and that's talked about in, second is it Second Chronicles? One of those where Solomon is building the temple. It literally says the bronze laver that they set up, that's considered the sea, and
Yeah,
so
it's called the
they
sea. Mhm.
they
Mhm.
called the temple, heaven and earth, and then the sea was on the outside because it was a ceremonial cleansing. We don't need that anymore. So in my opinion, and Lori's here, when there's no more sea in the book of Revelation,
Mhm.
that means no more ceremonial cleansing. No more priest was needed
It
because
doesn't mean
we
there's not
are.
an ocean.
Yeah. We are the kingdom of priests now.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I've definitely heard that interpretation, and I think the only thing I was talking with you guys off air a little bit. We actually, my friend Paul Stobbs from Understanding Conspiracy, we were breaking down this presentation by Gunnar Heinsohn, and see, I think we first talked last year. I was like really set on the Tartarian old world buildings
Mhm.
were like definitely created during the Millennial Kingdom. And I still believe some of them were. I think that like the cathedrals and things like that could have been that don't really make sense. But what I found really interesting is in this presentation, he was pointing out that in the first millennia, there was 700 years added to it. And so he talked about a collapse in when the Western Roman Empire collapsed, that was early antiquity. The Western Empire collapsed in mid antiquity, and then Northern Europe collapsed in late antiquity. But he was talking about how in the strata, like, so basically, if you had older things, the newer things would have built on top of it. So if you dug down in the dirt, you find older layers of the
Mhm.
buildings and the foundations and all that. But he pointed out the reason why we believe in a dark age is because we're told based on history that culture did not advance, language did not advance, and architecture did not advance at all in like 1,000 years. And what
Mhm.
he was saying was the reason for that was because there's false history in there. There's a bunch of years added. And he points to a year that we've talked about a little bit. It's called 536 AD. There was a time where it was the start of 18 months of darkness, followed by a mini ice age, the bubonic plague, wars, famines, and mainstream historians believe that up to 90% of the population of the world could have died during that time. So Gunnar Heinsohn was putting all the collapses to this one epic collapse that literally mimics like the pale horse,
Mhm.
the trumpets, the bowls of wrath, and that's where you get like the kind of the mud flood stuff, the sediment layers that are up. Like that's why they have to excavate Rome. That's why they find Roman things under things all the time. Like because
Mhm.
literally this empire was buried. Like they were literally farming in Rome, in the city of it, like in the 1500s. Like
Mhm.
there's illustrations where they were farming because the layers of sediment were over top of it. So it's my belief that yeah, I do believe the kingdom is spiritual, but I think that like that's a something that people just don't even know about. They don't know that that's why there's this dividing line between our chronology of whatever they used to date things like and why they date them now based on the time Christ was here. And that's why like that's when Christianity literally dominated the world. And that's why I think that's why a lot of the historical church believed in amillennialism, because they believed they were in the millennial kingdom. And I believe they were correct because they literally were living in that time period right afterwards.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I
I'm
haven't
sorry,
looked into that one. I know I was like, was Jenny gonna talk?
I
I didn't
thought
want
that
to
you,
talk over
like,
you.
froze.
I haven't looked into that one. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I fully know about like all the mud flood stuff and everything like that, but I haven't heard the timeline split like
Yeah, it
that.
was really interesting because like a secular historian, his best guess was why they started dating things the way they did is because he believed that after this cataclysm, it was basically monasteries were all popping up, and they're the ones who basically nurse society back to health. And
Mhm.
that's where Christianity spread. And they didn't have really much history besides the Bible. They read Revelation chapter 20 and they said, there's 1,000 years here. This seems like a time after the 1,000 years. So this mainstream historians will say this that AD chronology was adapted around 1,000 AD, which I see
Wow.
Huh.
is kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
That they would like if they were closer to Jesus, why would they I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, why would anyone
Mhm.
pick that date unless they believed that they were living post-apocalypse? And
Mm.
and now we're kind of trying to piece together the history. And even like, I mean, it's great work to find things that fit the mark. But I think that's why some people would try to question us. So when did this happen? When did this happen?
Mm.
It's like try to go find real history from the first 1,000 years. Good luck. It's like a sentence or two about a thing that happened. And there's really
Mm.
no history that backs everything up.
So my question for that is if that's the case, when was Satan released? And do you like was it right after that, like, 1,000-year mark? And if so, is that considered still a short season?
Well, I think based on like some people would say, okay, we're living like I said, if there were 700 years added, we're living in like the 1300s. But the way that this guy, maybe because he's a German and this is the way his brain worked, he would say that more recent history is more accurate. So he basically just moved things up. So he's just like, so we can kind of understand it. So what he was saying is like, just think about the times of Jesus being around more like around 800 AD. So if you think like you put 1,000 years after that, that's right around when the 1800s are.
Okay.
So then and if anybody's ever done any kind of old world
Mhm.
Tartarian research about all the crazy stuff that happened in the 1800s, you think about like in 1776, you have the American Revolution, then you have like right after that, you have the French Revolution, and then all the craziness that happens. All of America's burning, it's being built and burning down at the same time. And I think that's where it's been our belief in this community that it seems like it fits the chronology that we have, and it also fits just everything was going off the rails. Like it's like in America, it's like the best of times and it's the worst of times. The
Mhm.
nation just starts, everything's on fire. There's a civil war, but meanwhile, the nation is expanding and growing like crazy. I think that's when the false history we're taught. That's when you said, as we talk about Lacunza, and you got
Yeah.
all these modern,
Yeah.
just ridiculous biblical positions are all being
Mhm.
introduced at the same time. I think that's when Satan was
Hmm.
loosed, and then now we're kind of living in this age of deception where I think again it's really awesome. I shared that clip from Louis C.K. saying like the Christians won, right? And how do
Yeah.
I know? Because what year is it? We're living in 2025 Anno Domini.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it interesting now, if you go to academia, they're not saying AD anymore. They're not saying
Mhm.
BC anymore.
They
They're
say like
saying
CE.
BCE and
Yeah.
CE. So they're literally trying to
Yep.
say it doesn't have anything to do with Jesus, but we all know that it does. And I think
Yeah.
that that's when you have Darwinism, all the things are kind of being introduced where you had a very Christian world
Mm-hmm.
and now it's devolved in the way that academia teaches things. Everything that was Christian, everything that was like the patriarchy is bad, even though
Mhm.
this place is getting worse. It's like it's obviously the
Yeah.
more we move away from like traditional values, it's again, this is the fruit of it. And I think it makes sense to me that this
Yeah.
is of all the lies we've been unpacking, that this is where this is definitely it. And but to your point about what is a short season, the book of Revelation gives specific dates about specific timelines about certain things, but it's my belief that it says that Satan goes out and deceives the nations. So how long does that take? I believe it
Yeah.
takes as long as it takes, and I
Yeah.
think I think that maybe it's not there's no number on it because maybe it's undetermined.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm reading some of the comments. Maybe I shouldn't do that while we're on live, um, but some people are saying that I'm full preterist, and I just want to say I'm not full preterist, and I was not full preterist even when I came on with you last time. What I said last time, which I still kind of hold to, which is okay to disagree. And this is the thing. Like, we have to get to the point that it's okay to have different views on eschatology and still be friends and still talk about it. But um I Lori and I hold to more of the millennial reign is a spiritual reign.
Mhm.
Um and so and maybe it's because we haven't dug into this
Mhm.
really, JT, and that's totally fine. Like, we'll dig into it, like, right? And you said that you'd send us a video to watch on it, but not a full preterist, just a spiritual reign of Christ. And yes, I definitely think Satan absolutely could have been released in the 1800s, because I think we talked about this before
Mhm.
too.
Hmm.
All this stuff happened, right? We have dispensational come out. We have the Mormon Church, Jehovah
Mhm.
Witnesses. We have tons of stuff that happened
Yeah.
in the early 1800s. And so, yeah, could
Yep.
he be released during this time? Um, and be deceiving the nations again, because essentially what that means of when Satan was bound not to deceive the nations,
Yeah.
that's how the gospel spread.
Yeah.
Before that, he was able to deceive those disinherited nations
Yeah.
as to not accept Yahweh as the one true creator God. And so now, is he back doing that? I mean, we see a whole lot of stuff crazy happening, right? The past 200 years. So could it be? Absolutely. It could be. And so I just want to make sure people are understanding like kind of the position that we are coming from.
Oh yeah. I want to say, and obviously, again, like I have tried to be like this more, and I was probably a little more uptight. I'm sure you remember before, because I was literally just coming to this conclusion. I think I was a little more fearful about like what other people would think, because I
Yeah.
was like, I felt like I was going out on a limb, but I've been way more relaxed about it because, again, as we already said, that if we're not throwing shade at the post-trib people, the pre-trib people, then the people who are not quite at the exact same place we are
Hmm.
here,
Hmm.
again, faith in Jesus Christ is what makes us brothers and sisters. It's not eschatology. And I also agree that you're at where you're at because this is what you've learned so far. We're all works in progress, and this is
Yep.
not me trying to like disagree with you. This is just, I think there's some mind blowing stuff we've learned, and I think that I do think it's a mix of both, because I know that I even get shade thrown at me because I've said that if I don't subscribe to that Jesus was physically reigning here with the saints for 1,000 years, people would say, "Oh, you're a preterist." I was like, I'm just saying what Jesus said, because if he said that the kingdom's in not coming in ways that can be observed,
Hmm.
then it was my belief that how he reigned on earth for 1,000 years would be, as it said, through kings and priests.
Hmm.
So if we're the earthly representatives of Jesus being filled with the Holy Spirit. So it was my belief that yes, that time would have been better because there would have been less deception. The whole world became Christian. So if the whole world was Christian, would it be a better place right now? What if they weren't always trying to rob us blind and lie to
Hmm.
us about everything? What could happen if humanity did have a common goal that was beneficial to everybody? Could we do more than we're doing now? I think absolutely. So, I mean, could we have created better architecture then? Yes. Could we
Hmm.
create better art? Yes. We could have done, I mean, I think that human beings are capable of a lot. And if we all had a common goal of loving each other and doing for others what we want them to do unto us, then I think there's a lot of evidence that you could believe that this place would be better. So I think that, but I do think it's a mix of both, and I think that there is a lot of mystery, because especially if we're like in this community, we're kind of in that Revelation chapter 20 phase. There's really not a lot of details about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I do think I do feel like we should have grace for each other about like where we are and like how we see it, because again, we all still have the same hope in Christ and the resurrection and the place with no tears and all that.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, to Jenny's point, like when you talk about the kingdom and his kingdom coming, we know it's everlasting and we know it never ends. And so I think that's also why we don't put a literal 1,000 years to it. And it it's continuing and it will continue forever. And so that's the spiritual side of things, that he is reigning right now at the right hand of the Father.
Yeah,
And so
I
that's where
think
that
that's a
comes
little bit of
from.
the disconnect. Some people say it's like, so if Jesus came, well, where did he go, and when did it say the kingdom was going to end? It's like, well, what the 1,000 years is literally about is that the saints are resurrected and they're going to reign for 1,000 years. It says the devil is going to be bound for 1,000 years. Jesus is king. Jesus is king
Mhm.
whether we're after the 1,000 years or before the 1,000 years, or I mean, in the middle of it. He's king. The kingdom is eternal. The only thing like we're looking at is that what like that was the thing. Like that's the period. It's like, so we just know there's a determined amount of time that the devil is bound.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And I think that's really kind of like
Yeah.
where we're at. It's like
Yeah.
what does that time look like? And that's why we believe we're here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And we believe that he was bound during Jesus's ministry. And I think you're on the same page with us on that. Like when
Yeah,
Jesus
well, I think that
came.
he's. I mean, I think was it what it's. I know it's in John. It might be John 14 or 15 when he's saying that the devil, the ruler of this world is going to be bound.
Been
Mhm.
cast down and he
And
bound the
he has
strong
this,
man.
yeah, the parable about the binding the strong man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything you guys wanted to touch on? I know you guys said you guys had around an hour. Do you guys? Is there any points you guys want to hit while you're still on with me?
Lori, you have anything?
Not off the top of my head. There any questions that you saw, Jenny, that
Um, None that are sticking out.
Have you guys dug into like the other questions about like who do you think the two witnesses could have been?
Mhm. Yeah. And that could, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but we hold to the law and the prophets being the two witnesses. So again, it's kind of this spiritual take, but a lot went down, and I don't have those notes up right in front of me, but um, because correct me if I'm wrong, Lori, but Moses represented the law,
Mhm.
and then was it Enoch represented the prophets? Um, or no, Elijah. Sorry,
Elijah.
Elijah
Elijah,
represented the
yeah.
prophets. So yeah, I mean, we totally break this down. We've done Revelation studies and gone over it with people in our little community. So it's been fun. It's fun to talk about it. It's fun to learn new things and to dig in. Um, but overall, like just digging in, really, this is where I have felt the most peace of the Holy Spirit saying, like, you know, this is where you're at. And so whether or not we're right, even if dispensationalism is true and there is a rapture tomorrow, my hope and my trust is in Jesus Christ, and so I'd be raptured out, right? And so I'm like, "Huh." But this is kind of where I have felt the most peace. The Holy Spirit has just kind of softened and taken not necessarily fear, but just where I've landed. So
Well, and that's a lot of the feedback we've gotten too, is that it's taken the fear away. It's brought a lot of joy and peace that they hadn't had because of how they were taught. And I mean, we were taught the same way. We were taught the 7 year tribulation. We were taught that there would be a third temple and a one man antichrist. Like we were taught all of that because we both grew up in the church. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until we really started questioning where things came from and how they aligned with the cultural background and the historical perspectives that we're like, we're going to look at every single option available. Like put all the pieces on the table, lay them out. What do we have? And then starting at square one and going through and just really, really digging in to see what they were talking about.
Well, that's cool. I think that the interesting part is, and I think this is why you don't like try to divide people up by their eschatologies, because it's like, because whether you and I, three of us slightly disagree about how the things all played out, it's like I think that in the short season camp that I believe we're in, I still think that, again, if I don't know how long the short season is, I feel like that we have authority in Christ.
Yep.
We're not passive. We're not supposed to be spreading fear and doom and gloom
Yep.
constantly. We've got a job to do while we're here. And so, yeah, what if I'm wrong? It's like, well, then I guess I'm still right by trying to, to try to do what Jesus has wanted us to do. And I think that I have got a lot of peace through learning some of these things. And I
Mhm.
think that, yeah, I think it's funny. It's like, because I was like, I used to put the spooky music on and, and talk about like, ooh, the mark is coming. But I don't do that anymore. And I kind of like when I see other people doing that, it's like it's so cringe to me. And I'm thinking like,
Mhm.
you're gonna say that next week too, and you're gonna say that the next week. And when the tribulation doesn't start this year, you're gonna say it's next year.
Mhm.
It's like what like
Yeah.
but you were
I mean,
wrong. But you
Yeah.
and
golly,
nobody's
they
ever
wrote
gonna
a
apologize for being wrong. I
yeah,
I
they wrote a
apologize. I was
book
wrong. I was
about,
wrong before.
88 reasons that the rapture is going to happen in 1988.
Mhm.
And here we are decades later and they're still saying it because like Jenny was saying, the goalpost just gets kicked out. Oh, just kidding. We were slightly wrong about this. It's actually this instead. And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like they said. I mean, I remember I posted that clip from Glenn Beck when he was saying, This seems like this could be the end times." I know everybody says it's the end times. Everybody's thoughts end times, including the apostles, and they were wrong. And I just was like, I mean, it's so bold of him to say it, but it's like
Wow.
he's saying what the pre-trib people, the post-trib people are unwilling to say
Mhm.
because they do believe. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's hard. You read the text, you read the letters.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a time there's a very imminent threat happening. So if they were wrong and everyone since has been wrong, then I mean, does that give anybody more hope that everything's going to be all right? It seems like, yeah. So if those people were wrong and they were scaring everyone because they thought the end times were coming, maybe you should break this cycle of trying to scare the crap out of everybody every minute. And I
Mhm.
think that, to me, I think it probably creates more false converts to Christianity, because it is like a gun to your head, right?
Yep.
You better get
Yeah,
saved now. The
exactly.
Antichrist is coming. And so,
Yeah.
like, that, you're selling fire insurance. And I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing here. I think we're supposed to be offering people life and peace, not doom and gloom.
Yep.
We
Yep.
literally talked about this morning, JT, how there was such a fear base, and there, I mean, there still is, that it's, hey, you better get saved, otherwise you're going to burn in flames in hell. Like, it's based on what you want to avoid, instead of look at what the kingdom has to offer you.
Right.
Look at the abundance that Jesus wants to give you.
Mhm.
Look at the power and the authority that he has given you to go spread. That is your commission. And so when you focus on that, I mean, those two are literally night and day. They're 180s from each other. And so it's funny you mentioned that, because we literally talked about that this morning.
Mhm. Yeah, it's saving people based off of fear versus
Yeah.
based off of love and what we are as the kingdom and the
Yeah.
kingdom authority that we have through the Holy Spirit living inside of us. And so, I mean, I just would say, like, if anyone is approaching Revelation, not sure, like, how to read it, understand the Old Testament first.
Yeah.
Understand the symbolism that's used in
Yeah.
Ezekiel. The majority of Ezekiel is talking about the destruction of the first temple. Same
Yeah.
with Jeremiah, Isaiah. A lot of that, they're specifically talking about that 586 BC destruction. And so that same language is going to be used in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
John pulls from it because he's speaking of the destruction of the second temple
Yeah.
in that was coming. We hold to a like 65-ish date of when Revelation was written. I know some people totally disagree with that. There's arguments for both. Um, but we hold to that 65. And so literally in John's letters, even first, second, and third John, he's saying, hey, it's the last hours. We're
Right.
not the
Right. The
last
last
days
hour.
anymore. We're the
Yeah.
last hours. And he wrote those between 65 and like 68 AD. So literally the Roman army surrounded Jerusalem in 66. So it was the last hours at that point. They don't have a ton of years left like when Paul was writing. It was the last
Yeah.
hours.
Weren't most of Paul's letters, or they said to be written like in the 40s?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
I'm
40s, a
pretty
lot in the 50s as well.
okay? Well, that
but
makes sense. So what? Yeah. So what was your best? What is your best evidence? Because that is a question I get a lot. Is that,
Mhm.
like, try to prove that the Book of
Yeah.
Revelation was not written in 95? And my best case, I had my buddy Matt from Postmodern on, and it
Mhm.
Mhm.
made sense to me, was
Yeah.
the reason why there's no letters about, or books about, the temple being destroyed is because it hadn't happened yet.
Yep.
It's really, like,
Exactly.
I mean, it's almost like the most simple reasoning,
Well,
because
and
if this was written afterwards, well, there would certainly be some books in between that mention the destruction of Jerusalem.
he also mentions the fact, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have their passages. Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, all about the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple. And John doesn't write about it because he wrote an entire book about it called Revelation. The
That's a great point.
parallels are insane between Matthew 24 and Revelation, and like the seals and the trumpets and the bowls and everything like that. But um actually have a, I don't even know how long ago it was, Jenny. We have a podcast though that had dating the book of Revelation and why it's so important. And then we also had Matt on, and he talked about it as well. So do
Mhm.
you have any of that in front of you, Jenny?
Yeah, maybe
Uh,
if you guys can send me a link to that, obviously I can help promote that podcast. I can put, because I think that I literally had on one of the last streams, people were asking about that. Like,
mhm.
can you prove when because I do think that that's the thing that everybody tries to cling to, including myself at a time where
Yeah.
I was trying to say, well, no, Jesus could not have returned in 70 AD because the book of Revelation was written
Yeah.
afterwards.
Mhm.
And I think that's usually the best argument. I think what I found was a lack of evidence that it was written in 95 versus like,
Yeah.
there's really nothing concrete that they hang that on. They just try to say it's the emperors and
Well, they base that off of a statement from Irenaeus
Mhm.
saying that, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm literally going off of memory here, is that Irenaeus said that he saw John during the time of Domitian, and so they believe that that then dates Revelation to that 95 AD. And again, it's a translation and understanding error. And so
Yeah.
there is a book, Before Jerusalem Fell by Kenneth Gentry, that goes into all of the breaking down. Like, okay, here's what people say of why it's written after the temple fell. And we're going to kind of poke holes in all of this and show you that no, it was really written in prior to the fall. So 64 to 66 typically is what people hold to of when it was written. And I mean, yeah, so you ask yourself some of these questions is, does John talk about the destruction of Jerusalem? That would have been the biggest thing, like the biggest thing of their lifetime besides Jesus coming, right? Is
right.
the fall of Jerusalem. He didn't talk about that. Um, and John says that he is a fellow partaker in tribulation in Revelation 1:9.
Yeah.
Um, and looking again at the Old Testament references in the book of Revelation, and um, I believe that when he's told to measure the temple in Revelation 11, I believe that that's the temple that's still standing.
Right.
Mhm.
And then I'm just looking at
There's
some.
also the 7 churches in Asia and them there only being a specific window when those churches were there.
Right. That's actually another point we made. We
Mhm.
did a video about that, that
Yeah.
all those churches had to be excavated. So again, like if I go back to what Jesus was telling them, all the bad things were going to happen, except none of the good things. So if Jesus is telling them he's coming quickly, those churches are destroyed. Well, you're saying like that
Mhm.
every bad thing he predicted was going to happen, but except for the all the good things that he was predicting. I'm going to go to one thing real quick is in Revelation 17. This might give you an idea of when it was written. Is because if you go to Revelation 17:10, it says there are also 7 kings, 5
Mhm.
who have fallen,
Yeah.
one who
Mhm,
is, and the
Mhm.
other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while.
Yeah.
So it's the context is now because he's talking about in past tense. There's 5. There's one that is now, and then there's one that's coming. So what we're led to believe is that we had all those emperors of Rome afterwards.
mhm.
Well, so when
So the
you
book
look
would
at
be
the
inaccurate. It would be
emperors,
inaccurate, right? Like you would have to say
yeah,
that it's not true if it wasn't then.
Yep.
you have Julius Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, Gaius, Claudius, and then the 6th emperor was Nero. So during the 6th emperor was the one that was. And then Galba, who followed him, he only reigned 6 months. He was the
Interesting.
one that followed for a short time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like because so you have a very specific time period
Yeah.
because the king he was talking about now was then.
Mhm.
So there was only
Yep.
one. There was only one that was coming after that,
Yeah.
and of course, I think the one thing that really, I think the one thing that can't be overstated is that when Daniel gets a prophecy, he's told to
Mhm.
seal up this book until
Mhm.
the times of the end, and then the contrast in Revelation, do not seal up this prophecy
Mhm.
because the time is at hand. So now, why would they say seal it up when one is 500 years later and we're still 2,000 years later waiting for this to just start?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, another
I
good
mean,
book
so
too
many
of.
times Jesus says he's coming quickly. These things will be, it's shortly must come to pass. Like there's so many things where it's imminent sounding.
Mhm. I was gonna say another good book is The Art of Revelation by Dr. Jonathan Welton. That is a good one too, and it lists out, like, how it was written before, the
Mhm.
proofs of it. I think he has, like, 9 or 10 proofs in there, and I have it downstairs, but not with me, otherwise I'd read that section for you. So,
Is that in Eden to Eden
I'm
by
looking,
chance?
but I can't find it.
Okay. I was just gonna search.
Yeah.
No,
So
I think the cool thing is that the more you dig into this, you can find almost everything they're talking about. And if you really think about it, even like the point about that there's a number associated with a name,
Hmm.
I think it makes sense that the reason why it was possibly written in some kind of gematria code was because if he wrote Caesar Nero in this letter,
Yeah.
Mhm.
that might not have got to the people.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah.
It's not like it's really because it's really makes no sense if you think about it. So everybody's checking everybody's name versus number for 2,000 years, or he's writing about a person right now. The name
Because the
fits
Romans
that.
aren't going to have that same understanding of how the Hebrew, like numeric alpha system worked.
Hmm.
So it was code.
It makes sense that it was code. It really doesn't make a lot of sense if it wasn't code because yeah, again, like even today we're trying to use a Hebrew gematria or Aramaic gematria, Greek gematria versus English names now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I found real quick before we hop off
I was gonna say, I
about
just found it, Jenny.
the dating of Revelation. Here's a couple different proofs. The earliest existing version of the New Testament is called the Syriac. Written in Aramaic, includes a sentence right before the book of Revelation that says, "Again, the revelation which was upon the holy John, the evangelist from God, when he was on the island of Patmos, where he was thrown by Emperor Nero." So that would have had to have been between 54 and 68 AD. Then we have the seven kings, like you said, JT. Um, Revelation 1:7 says those who pierced him would see Jesus coming. This places the events and the writings of Revelation within the lifespan of those who would have been adults during the crucifixion. So
Hmm.
within that generation, um, and we have one of the early church fathers,
Yeah.
Jerome, wrote down in one of his books that John the Apostle was seen, and he was with difficulty was carried into the church in AD 96 and could only speak a few words to the people. So John was feeble and infirm with age by 96 AD. However, in Revelation 10:11, God told John, "You must prophesy again about the many peoples, nations, language, and kings." This indicated that he would live longer and be healthy enough to travel back and speak to these rulers about all of this.
So he would have been like 66,
Mhm.
like totally able and capable of making the circuit. Like we know he was in Ephesus. Makes way
Yeah.
more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
well,
then
was it? Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, I was just gonna wrap up with the statement from Irenaeus. So this is a quote from Kenneth Gentry's Before Jerusalem Fell book. Irenaeus's argument regarding the identity of the person represented by 666. So he wrote, "We will not, however, incur the risk of pronouncing positively as to the name of the Antichrist, for if it were necessary that his name should be distinctly revealed in this present time, it would have been announced by him who beheld the apocalyptic vision. For that or he was seen no very long time since, but almost in our day towards the end of Domitian's reign." So Gentry says this context seems to demand that Irenaeus refers to John, whom he believes to have lived almost to his life, his own time. When Irenaeus said it would have been announced by him, it would have most logically followed that his next statement would be translated, "For he was seen no very long time since, but almost in our day." So, in other words, Irenaeus appears to be urging, if John, who wrote Revelation with this mysterious 666, had wanted us to know who the 666 was, he would have told us personally, for he lived a long time after writing it, almost into my own time.
And that Irenaeus statement is the one that everybody holds to for the 95 date because they say it's Domitian's reign. But that's where the translation error comes in. And so that's why we loved this breakdown of putting it in like, just give me layman terms. Like,
Mhm.
what is this actually trying to say? And so he's saying that he would have told us if he wanted to, because he lived a long time after it, almost to my time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just to put a fine point on it, why would they write this to these seven churches if it wasn't going to happen to them?
Exactly.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's what I
So
said.
true.
It's almost like the most simple point is like you're opening up somebody else's mail, and then you're
Mhm.
saying, "Well, obviously this is written to me."
Yep.
Be like, "What are you crazy?" It's like it's literally addressed to those people, and again, the proof is in the pudding because those churches do not exist anymore. So it was either true to them or it was not. And only people like Glenn Beck is willing to say that they were wrong. But I think it's really interesting to finish this off is some of the greatest examples of melted things are in modern day Turkey. If you've ever seen like the pictures of Cappadocia, and then there's places that are inside the earth where there's like up to 20, like they said, up to 20,000 people could live. I mean, it kind of mirrors like the idea that these great men and these kings were going to go inside the earth to try to hide themselves from the face of the face of the Lamb in his wrath. I think there's a lot of physical evidence, and I think scripturally, I think it's a really solid case that, yeah, the mark came, the beast came and went, both.
Yeah, amazing. So cool.
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Please, while you guys are still here, again, repeat where everybody can find you guys.
You can find us at therootedtruth.com and The Rooted Truth on Instagram. Lori's Remnant Rising 5.0. I'm mostly just on The Rooted Truth. I feel like I'm rarely on my own Instagram anymore.
So,
Instagram.
I
they just
know.
love us so much.
Yep.
Well, again, I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I think I'm going to hang on for a little bit. So I'm going to maybe do a little Q&A. I'll hang out for a little bit. But once again, Lori and Jenny, really appreciate it. I will try to drop some links in the description. If you guys want to share them to me on Instagram, what you guys want me to post in like the description. So if people want to check out your podcast, y'all's Instagram, whatever you guys are promoting, I can do that for you guys. So once again, appreciate it. Always love talking to you guys.
Sounds great. Thanks, JT.
Great. Thanks, JT.
Okay, God bless. What? You still on, Lori? Okay, here we go. Wait, is this me now? Let me see. Yeah, so what do you guys think? I thought that was an excellent conversation. Like I said, I think that, again, we have to reiterate that, yeah, we can disagree about certain things, and obviously I don't think at this point they're major disagreements. I think that they were all on this process of learning and growing and changing. And I think we need to give people grace because we need grace, because we could be wrong too. We could be wrong about a lot of stuff, because I have been wrong about a lot of stuff. So what's going on? You guys want to do some Q&A while I'm here? We can do whatever. I always typically stay on for about 2 hours. So I'm here. So are the aliens are real? Well, there's certainly things that are alien to us, but they're not from outer space, if that's what you want to get. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for joining up again. Yeah, they're great. I love talking to them. I've done many podcasts with Jenny at this point. Like literally, I think that might have been the first podcast I was invited on. I was invited on the Rooted Truth podcast. And I gave my testimony, and then I went back on shortly after that, and we talked how demonic Disney is. Yeah, that's always a great topic. We did a good breakdown of Disney. JT, what's your take on 3 time zones between Alaska and Russia? I did not know that until very recently. So I think it's very sus. I think that, how does it look on a Mercator map? How does it look on the AE map? Would it make more sense if we were on a flat biblical plane? Because on the globe model, how does that work? Why does that work like that? So the answer to your question is, I think it's sus. I think it's very sus. What do you guys think? My husband was rooting for you. Why did you cut your hair? Okay, let's just address the haircut. So what was funny is that if you guys don't follow me now on Spotify and Apple or wherever you get your audio podcasts on, I forgot to post this. So I posted it this week about when Brian and I did a conversation about how Revelation was written for us, but not to us. right? And some lady was throwing shade at Brian because he's got long hair, and they were quoting Paul and talking about how it's shameful to have long hair. And so I reiterated that I was my hair is pretty long. I don't plan on cutting it. Let's just say I did not lie. I was trying to get a little trim, and the little trim turned into a full blown mullet. And not like the glorious like Mel Gibson, Kurt Russell, Sylvester Stallone, Patrick Swayze type mullet from the 80s. It looked more like I don't want to say Joe Dirt, but it was let's just say it was closer to Joe Dirt than it was those. And so there was only one way to fix it. And so what you call this right here, this is a happy little accident. It was not my intention to do this. Yeah, it might have been more like Kenny Powers because I got a little bit of the curly hair. And then so this is what was the result. Which, to be perfectly honest, I am okay with it. I needed a change. This is way more low maintenance. This is like this is this is how I wake up now. And that's why, I won't have to wear as many hats as often because a lot of times I was wearing the hat to tame the mane. There was too much. It got to be a bit much. But like I said, Lord willing, one day I'll move to a place with that's not so humid. Like I've always had these dreams of moving out west where we could all go hiking together. If that happens, I think the hair will be long and flowing and it won't be all out like an afro. But yes, the hair will grow back. The hair will grow back. My hair grows fast. So yeah, sometimes trims turn into full blown haircuts. And this is the first one I've had in dang, like probably right around the time I did a podcast with Jenny Mire. It might have been the last time I cut my hair, like one of the first ones I did with her. Yeah, that was like the last real haircut I got until this one. Yeah. So let's now that we've discussed the hair enough, let's talk about do you guys got any more questions? Try to because we got a lot of people in here. What do we still have? We still have almost 600 in here. So if you guys want me to answer a question, try to maybe put question in all caps so I can see it. The leave-in conditioner works wonders. See, I never even tried that. See, now you tell me. There's no way to make it longer fast. It's just not going to happen. So you live and you learn. um, it's still the same number on your head. He knows the number of your hairs on your head. Amen. Amen. Madelaine's video, thank you. Thank you, Leanne Mary Hugh. Appreciate it. Yeah, everyone has been raving about Leaving Babylon's new video. Is it like the Land of Jesus? I have not watched it. I got to be perfectly honest. I have been pretty swamped with my own content lately. Really swamped with doing all the things. And then occasionally I get invited to somebody else's podcast. So I have not had as much time to listen to content because I'm doing all the things. But yes, I will have to check it out because everyone has been saying like that is a mind-blowing episode. So I'm going to do that. What do you think? What do you think about Madeline's video? I just said I hadn't seen it yet, but I heard it's very good. I heard people have been raving about it. Yeah, so Jason Jack gets it. He gets it that when you're doing stuff and then you got like the day job and stuff, which I made a step toward maybe getting to do this full time. I finally had a conversation with the family about saying that this is my intention. So it's still up to the Lord when the timing is, but I think that we're inching closer to me having more time to do this kind of thing. Oh, and you know what? While we're here, this is maybe not for everybody, but I had a thought. So last week I had Josh on from Josh Truex from Modern Roots Life. He gave his testimony about leaving the Hebrew Roots movement. And so obviously you guys know the sponsorship now, Modern Roots Life. That's, so if you guys are looking for healthy supplements, Modern Roots has the best in the business, great Christian company. But what him and I have been talking about is because I started to, obviously take the supplements myself, that I thought, and this will probably not be for YouTube yet, but I thought about for doing for Apple and Spotify, maybe doing like a 30-minute ish podcast a week about like health and wellness and just like, no, it's not going to be just an infomercial. So, guys, whatever. But obviously, I like to work out. I used to train for marathons. I used to do cycling races, crazy endurance stuff, working out and stuff like that. So if you guys are interested in that, I also have possibly the wife might jump on because she has a lot of knowledge about obviously the other components about being healthy. And I thought it would be good to talk about that and kind of like talk about it in a godly way. And obviously in the way that my balance was so out of whack previously. And that's why it's almost been like a trap for me about like, because I was so ate up with working out and trying to eat right to either like look a certain way or to function really well in an endurance race. But at the same time, there was like I think last year I had stopped working out. I had been like injured and things started slipping. And the more the things started slipping, like your mental faculties kind of deteriorate a little bit if you're not taking care of your body. And so I think I don't want to ever make it an idol again, but I do think it's important to be healthy. So I think it would be good. And like I said, it would be a separate thing. We were talking about doing something like 30 minutes a week. And so if you guys are interested in something like that, please maybe leave a comment on like the regular video to see how much interest is in that. Because I think it would be a great idea. Because I just think that I would be kind of your I would be hopefully I'd be asking the questions you guys are interested in because guys like Josh, he's like has a great history in health and wellness and like personal training and stuff like that. So if you guys are into that, I think if I did that, it would make me more motivated to maybe clean up my diet a little bit and try to, walk the talk. So if you guys are interested in that, guys, let me know. But with that being said, do you guys have any more questions? I think it would be I think that'd be fun. I'm looking for more ways because I think that again, if I'm going to do this full time, I'm going to talk about other things. Overtraining makes me feel rough. See that visionary vet. That was one of my biggest traps. Is the fact that I kind of had this type A workout mentality, and I broke down a lot because I was training too much. Isn't it interesting that like you can do more with less sometimes? And it seems counterintuitive, but like obviously about like the rest, the adaptation to the training, work smarter, not harder. And they also say that you can't out train a bad diet. So obviously, and again, with if modern roots, they can provide some supplemental things to help you feel healthy. And that might be a cool thing to see how it's working because I can check it and I can question them saying, "Hey, you said this was going to work like this," and it either has or it hasn't. So, okay, what do we got here? Do we got some questions? JT, what's your take on the Pope hitting 88 miles an hour? Okay, so great question, Val. Yesterday, Brian and I recorded episode 27 of JT's mixtape. And of course, we talked, typically, I think we recorded about an hour and a half. We probably talked about 45 minutes about the Pope stuff. So, spoilers, I'll tell you a little bit what I think. I think it's really interesting, the number 88. I think you also have what Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum also steps down at 88. Okay, so at the same time, well, again, I know that gematria and all that kind of stuff is a little bit verboten. It's a little bit like I don't think that we're supposed to be checking everything versus the numbers, but we do know that they believe in these kind of numbers. 88, 88's like kind of like an infinity number. It's also associated with the planet Saturn. Saturn, Satan, maybe. Like there's You have in the mythologies, so Saturn, one of his other names in the Greek mythology would be Kronos. And Kronos was depicted as Father Time. So I think it's pretty interesting that, yes, he and Klaus Schwab go at the same day. No, I thought that they said, well, Klaus Schwab, didn't he retire? I thought, didn't he just get his replacement? Am I wrong about that? Uh, hopefully I didn't get that completely wrong. But I thought that he stepped down too at 88 years old. Well, whatever. Whether it was last year or this year, both of them either stepping down or falling down dead at 88. I think it's pretty interesting. You have the stuff in like Back to the Future. How do you go back to the future? You gun it to 88 miles an hour in the DeLorean. And then so 88 is clearly associated with time. Maybe it was his time. And maybe it was for the star of Remphan, Saturn, right? Yeah, see, somebody's trying to tell me that Kyle Schwab retired last year. I knew it was this year. Well, maybe it wasn't the same day. It was 88. We also talked about this, and again, this is spoilers. Hopefully, it's not going to wreck your JT's mixtape episode 27 experience. I think it's pretty interesting that the Pope opened those doors that had not been opened for like something like 500 years. These sealed up doors at the Vatican or whatever, and it was something associated with like the portal to Lucifer or the door to Lucifer and like the door to Paul or whatever that was. That's sort of weird, right? That he gets sick very shortly after he opened up this thing that was not meant to be opened up. Vatican flag equals 888. Okay, see the eights. Yeah, see the eight obviously is the infinity symbol, right? Time, eight. Yeah, I think that there could be something there. But you know what's interesting? Have you guys, once you started to learn numbers, do you guys see numbers in places? Because I see numbers in a lot of places and I don't often talk about it. I only tell certain people that I see certain numbers a lot. And it's almost like, is that why some of this stuff can be dangerous? Is because when you know about numbers, you see them. So is this literally them calling their shots and they're doing these things based on the numbers? Or do the numbers just reflect what happened? Because I kind of want, I gotta say, I gotta wonder that sometimes it's like, because I don't do things, but yeah, VL Jones Sr., I've been seeing the 11s a lot. And 11 is a magic number. It's also a spiritual number. And I don't want to think of it like an omen because I'm not superstitious in that way. But it is pretty interesting that like once you start to like recognize numbers, you see them in lots of places. It's kind of creepy. It's like I think that the dangerous part about that is that you make decisions based on numbers, right? And or you don't do things or you do things based on numbers, numerology. It's yeah, exactly. Somebody said it's KK Westbury says it's like astrology. Right. And so I think that's the trap of it. It's like wouldn't it be interesting enough if like the heavens reflect things that are, and then some people would say it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy where like you see something, therefore you do something. But it is interesting. Like I said, it is interesting that like these things just so happen to happen. And And to be perfectly honest, it's like if you read the Bible, knowing numbers have meaning, because the Bible mentions that numbers have meanings. Well, clearly there's godly numbers. And again, like there's numbers of the world. And that's the kind of funny part about it is because if it wasn't 88, it could have been a different number that would also have a meaning because they all have meanings, right? But yeah, if it was like March 22nd, we would say it was 322 and we'd be like, oh, snap. That's the number of skull and bones. but it just so happened to be 88. It is sort of interesting that it was the number, or it was the day after Easter. That's kind of strange timing. And obviously, you have the JD Vance stuff about how he wished him well, and then he fell over dead right afterwards. Like JD Vance was like the Grim Reaper. Sort of weird. Sort of weird. You got any more questions? Pearl says, I don't really hold any weight in the numbers. Gematria is just confusing. LOL. Yeah, I mean, it is. Again, because all these numbers kind of have some kind of meaning. So, like, again, if it's not this number, it's this other number that means this. So either way, it's kind of like us trying to make sense of the weird people who run this world in like what they think the numbers are. 422 equals 8. I'm telling you, I mean, I'm saying like, yeah, I mean, that's so yeah. So if 422 equals 8, then he died at 88. That's 3/8. I don't know. I don't know. Again, like I said, I don't know. I guess we're all aware enough to know that certain things are planned on certain days, and certain people live to be a certain amount. How old was the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth? How old was she when she died? Was she 93? That'd be interesting because that's a 9 and a 3. I think it was. Anybody in the chat, do you guys know how old she was when she died? Sean, it was the Pope. Pope Francis died at 88. Whatever became of the research into the hagiographies? Well, for one, that was not my research. I just told you. Oh, she was 96. Again, 9-6. You have the 3-6-9 stuff. That's interesting. 93 or see again, it could have been 93 or 96. It still has the same meaning for me, but I don't even know what that means. I graduated high school in 96, but that was not satanic that I did that. But the hagiographies, I think that it would be interesting to dig more into that. Actually, I would really like to I need to get Alpha Talks back on the podcast because he knows a lot about some of this stuff. I mean, again, I think that some people kind of like poured some cold water on there, or they just made everything weird about the hagiographies, because that video we did with Adam was about like his research that he used AI to try to, I guess, either translate or get some answers about these hagiographies. And so some people now have a bad taste in their mouth about hagiographies, thinking they're all fake, but they're not all fake. I mean, hagiographies are a real thing. The real issue is with hagiographies, though, I think that most of them are not written in English. I do know that there's English translations of them, but I have not read any of them. I think it's interesting. I think it's really interesting. Again, I think it could be proof that some of the things in the millennial reign that we believe could have happened. Maybe that's evidence of it. I do think it's interesting that we often throw shade at the Roman Catholic Church and even some people at the Orthodox Church. There's rightful complaints about both those churches. But I think it's interesting is they actually believe that the hagiographies are legit. So there's Christians in the world, and I know some people would say that church, the Roman Catholic Church, is not Christian, but I believe that there's people who have faith in Christ in those churches that also believe the hagiographies are real. So if we had saints doing miraculous things, I think that's pretty interesting. I think it's worth pursuing. Unfortunately for your boy here, it's not worth pursuing for me yet because like I said, I'm spread thin, guys. That's why I like to just come on here and ramble about the things I already kind of know and have people who are smarter than me come on with me, and then they can tell me about the things they know. And then I can have a movie reference for them. That's my game right here. But I do think it's worth looking into for sure. Okay, let me see. Did Jason Jack, did you say, let me see, I saw that he sent a message. Did he say that Vitaly already did a video about that? Did I see somebody say that? I have to look into that. like I said, Vitali, he's awesome. He was the guy who really turned me onto the short season first. And Vitali's got a lot of receipts. He's a very well researched guy, and I know he's been really busy with his day job because otherwise he'd have been. He's got an open invitation to come on whenever. Yeah, he's really good. Like that dude is definitely done more like kind of scholarly research than I have. I've done a little bit. He's done a lot. JT, you being on my TV so much, you got my husband on board. That's awesome. Praise God. He hasn't been turned off by the hagiography talk or anything weird we've been talking about. It's actually really been cool. I've had a few people who I know from back home are like finding the podcast for the first time and they're like, wow, you guys, that's really good what you guys are talking about. I sent one of my friends from back home the Gunnar Heinsohn, the very first part one of the Gunnar Heinsohn breakdown, and his mind was blown. Jason Jack says, have you listened to the song Indigo by Sam Barber? The lyrics are from Fallen Angels. I have not. Do I want to listen to it? That sounds scary. That's interesting, though. Okay, Bull Bear says, didn't Saint Malachi predict the Pope, saying the next Pope would be the last and of dark complexion? See, again, this is, you guys are asking questions that are going to be addressed on JT's mixtape episode number 27 that will release Monday at 8 p.m. as they're always released. 27. I've been doing it 27 weeks. But yes, we're told. But I think again, this whole Malachi prophecy is based on kind of this unbroken chronology, and so they're dating all the popes. It's in the same way that they would date all the Caesars, supposedly, who came way after Jesus. But in the Gunnar Heinsohn research, in the short season research, we would say, no, 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 no. I don't believe that there is an unbroken history from the times of Jesus to now. So if there is a broken timeline, then you'd have to say that the amount of popes in between is a fraudulent number. Could it be? Could they be conflating some bishops and they're putting them in a certain timeline because they're trying to fill up 1,000 years of history in the first millennium? But we believe in this community that there was not 1,000 years in the first millennium. I'm not even sure that there was 1,000 years in the last millennium. So again, if there's not enough popes, I mean, I think that they're trying to stretch the popes out. So I think what was it like 112 popes, and there was going to be a last pope. Okay, so here's the issue here: is that from my perspective, all these questions about like, is there going to be this last pope? And so when they say the black pope, the black pope is not black. I mean, it's like, so could they pick a guy who is of a darker complexion? Yes, but that is not what the black pope is known to be. The black pope is like a Jesuit pope. It's not like it's not like the color of his skin is dark. That's not important. Only to racists is that important. What it's really about is obviously something it's like a little bit darker of the way he does things. I always thought that the black pope was supposed to be, I could be wrong about this, but I thought the black pope was like a hidden pope. Like the pope people don't know about is the black pope, not the color of the pope. It's not because they pick a pope from Africa, which they might, but that's not the same thing. And it always has something to do with the fact that what they're going to try to do is with this prophecy about this last pope or the next to last pope or whoever's the last pope next, it's same story. Okay, therefore the end times. Therefore the mark of the beast. Therefore the third temple. Therefore the one world religion. Therefore the great tribulation and the rapture and all that stuff. What I find interesting is that many people have already speculated that, including like I think Tom Horn, is Tom Horn, who's no longer with us, he passed away, I think, 2 years ago. He did some great research into all the things we've looked into about, especially about like Nephilim and giants and stuff. But he was a futurist. I believe he was even a pre-tribber, and he wrote a book called The Last Pope, and he predicted that Francis was the last pope. So so again, it's funny. I mean, it's like again, like it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter which futurist it is. Of course, the current pope is the last pope. They all think all of them are going to be the last pope because the great tribulation is surely going to happen right now. So there's always the last pope. But is this the last pope? Well, I mean, unless the end times, the last days are literally in a couple days, then there's going to be another pope after St. Francis. Will there be another pope after him? Only God knows. I don't know. But I think again, the talk of a Malachi prophecy, again, it's not from the book of Malachi. So, I mean, I don't know how reliable his prophecies are. I think again, it's more to stir up end times drama, fear porn and all that stuff. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. Okay, let's see. I got a couple questions in me. Okay, so Stacy Casanova says, question, JT, what do you think about the Conclave movie about the Pope being replaced? It came out last year. Well, I mean, interesting timing. Again, most time the Pope is introduced, they're pretty old already. So you're always ready for the next Pope because they're old. They're old men when they take office. I mean, could this be a predictive programming for people that they say that they know that the Pope is gone, is short for this world? Possibly. I do think that that's likely that could be true. They probably knew the writing was on the wall. Very similar in the way that there was a lot of predictive programming coming out about the queen going to pass away the year she passed away. They literally minted a coin. Have you guys ever seen that? So I think January, the year she died, it it actually gave the dates of when she started her reign as queen, and then they ended it in, I guess, what was it, 2023, something like that. I think it was 2023, right? Or is it 2022 that she passed? And yeah, so she passed, I think it was 2022. It was like whatever the date was from when she started, and it said this date until 2022. And it was like, wow, that's dark. Cause I mean, she died that year. It was almost like they knew. Cause maybe they did. Oh, come on, Black Legend. That's a low blow. I respect Tom Horn. He's been accurate though. Well, it depends. I mean, again, like it's my belief that when you prophesied something, and I don't know if he ever said, "Thus saith the Lord," that this is going to happen, or if he just had a dream or he had a vision and he wrote a book about it. He was wrong. I also believe he's wrong about Apophis, whatever people have talked about that. This this asteroid that's going to come in 2029. I think again, like the modern day prophets or the prophets, if you will. I think prophecy is still real. There's still people really prophesying and telling true things. But I think by and large, the people who put prophet next to their name, they're not prophets. They're not prophets. They make a lot of predictions. Some don't come to pass, some do. It's it's kind of like saying that I'm predicting the Pope is going to die this year. Did you predict that while he was in the hospital? Because if you did, that's not quite a "Thus saith the Lord" moment for me. Question: when can I watch Ancient Angels? Sorry, Virginia, I got to forward that to Brian. So Brian is on the technical side of the Ancient Angels thing. I was just a guest star, or I was a co-star in Ancient Angels. I had a lot to do with the promotion of it and stuff, but Brian has put it on his website. And when we make a next movie, we're probably not going to use Vimeo again. because Vimeo has been a massive headache because lots of people have had problems trying to get it. But yeah, I will try to forward your email along to Brian, and Brian will get that sorted. Lickety split, hopefully. Bull Bear, no one bats 1,000 these days, which is interesting. Well, I mean, again, like, like the biblical, in the Old Testament, if you said, "Thus saith the Lord," and you were wrong, you are not a prophet of God. But now it's kind of like, is it like the major leagues? If you bat 300, it's pretty good. Gets you to the Hall of Fame. But in God's standard, 300 is abysmal. Got about 1,000. Prophets, we know that prophets come when they speak God's law, God's holy law, and also, yeah, the things they say come to pass. Typically it's like prophets, apostles. I mean, they normally do miracles to show that they're from God too. At least in the Bible. I mean, we could be living in a different kind of time period where the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is obviously not like the book of Acts. But I still believe that the Holy Spirit still heals. I still believe in the gift of tongues. I've never spoken tongues, but I still believe that gift is real. I believe in the gift of healing. I believe also in the gift of knowledge and teaching and all the things. Now, are there modern day apostles? I don't think so. I don't think that there's any modern day. I think anybody who would proclaim the title of apostle is someone you should run far from. Isn't Greg Locke? Isn't he the apostle Greg Locke now? What more do you got to say? Greg Locke, apostle Greg. No, he's not an apostle. That dude is a false teacher. That guy has got some jacked up doctrines, and yeah, he doesn't display a lot of fruit, especially when he's debating people. Paul says the Greeks are always looking for signs. That's not trusting or faithful. Actually, you know what? I think he's saying the Jews were looking for signs and the Greeks were looking for knowledge. So it's kind of like you have these two camps. You have the signs, you kind of have like the mystical side, and then you have the knowledge side. It kind of makes sense that you'd have like the world would look for more from a sciencey angle, and then the Jews who were in Jesus' time was the wicked generation that were always looking for signs because they believed in, I think that this is where they get that Kabbalah mysticism stuff. I think that's what that was about. Rhonda Humes, question. What do you think about the underground cities like, how do you say that? Dernikio? I'm really bad at pronouncing things. Um, I don't really know much about that, but I do believe that there's lots of underground things everywhere. I think that there's stuff underground pretty much every major city in America. All the West Coast cities I often talk about that there's underground things everywhere. And I think that is a result of the cataclysm that happened in the first millennia, Revelation. I think that's why things are buried. Now, there could have been other, maybe more regional mud flood things, if you will, but yeah, there's really strong evidence that there's underground structures everywhere. I don't think that fits the narrative because I don't think it makes sense that more primitive people hollowed out and dug tunnels and like underground cities under everywhere. It makes no sense to me. Sam Crowell, apostles lived with Jesus or had a direct interaction somehow, right? Well, yeah. Well, yeah, the apostles they learned from Jesus, they saw him resurrected, and obviously, I believe they're with him now in heavenly Jerusalem. Okay, so Lexington, Kentucky, lots of underground tunnels. Abe Lincoln's wife's house, Mary Todd, a witch, to the Catholic Church. Yeah, I mean, the more you look about that stuff, there's underground stuff everywhere, including I mentioned. So I am near Norfolk, Virginia, and I did some old world research, boots on the ground stuff, and I was looking at these crazy old churches, pretty awesome looking cathedrals in Norfolk, and they have Antiquitech and everything. And I talked to one of the guys who was a patron of that church, one of those churches, and the guy just casually admitted to me saying, "Oh yeah, there's underground tunnels under this thing," which don't make a lick of sense based on what I've been taught about the place we live. Like Norfolk, Virginia is like 7 foot above sea level, 7 feet. So we're told here you can't have basements where we live because if you dig into the ground, you're going to go right into the water table because we're too low. And yet, all the old buildings in Norfolk have that mud flooded look. They're all under the ground, even though Norfolk floods like crazy. And then you go to a different level and you say there's tunnels connecting some of these buildings. That don't make no sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. So, yes, I would say that there is evidence of tunnel systems everywhere. All you have to do is look. And I think, again, it does not fit the narrative of the history we're taught. Black Legend says, "Have you read?" Ralph Ellis says, "Historical proof of Jesus as king of Edessa, and Paul as Josephus, the historian." I have not read that. That's interesting. That's interesting take, though. I've not heard that. Um, Off topic. I open my DMs? I don't often. Put it this way: if somebody sends me a DM, sometimes I glance over it, but this is not bragging or anything. But I mean, I have a lot of followers on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So I get a lot of messages. Lots of them go straight to the junk part of mailboxes, and occasionally I check them. But I already told you guys that I am barely keeping my head above water doing the things I'm doing right now. So I am terrible about responding to people. Occasionally I do. Occasionally I do, but if you make it brief, a brief question or something like that, I might respond. Maybe. Steph says, "Thoughts on the Mandela effect, glitches in the matrix." That's interesting. My wife was just asking me about glitches in the matrix. I I think it's very difficult. The Mandela effect thing, it's really troubling to me because I believe some of the evidence, it does make a strong case that the Mandela effect is real. I guess I feel like I'm more like I'm a Mandela effect agnostic. And maybe it's because nothing has hit so close to home to me that's affected my life. But I feel like that I don't want to ever rest my proof of the Mandela effect on my own memory because I can remember lots of things, but can I remember lots of things perfectly? If it's changed slightly, I mean, like the Berenstein Bears or the Berenstain Bears. Yeah, I remember the Berenstein Bears. So that's weird. Looney Tunes with either the Tunes, Tunes, or Toons. I remember it with Tunes like Too, but it's not right. Chick fil A. Chick fil A with the K now. I always remember Chick fil A with the C at the end, where chick hyphen filet, right? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's like it. It seems to me like I remember those things. What was the other one? It was like King Tut's, like the golden mask. Everyone remembers like one serpent on it, right? And then there's two. Was there always two? I don't know. Yeah, people mention the Mandela effect in the Bible. See, the Mandela effect in the Bible here. This is me. And I can't say for sure. And I know some people who believe the KJV is the only way to go. Don't read anything else. Over the past 5 years, when growing up in Christian school, all we did was read the KJV. So that's how I learned the Bible for the most part. But then as I became an adult, people obviously, well, we got a little bit older. People were starting to use the NIV. And then when I started reading the Bible on my own, I've read, I think starting 2 years ago, I think I read the ESV, I've read the New Living Translation, then I read the ESV again. This year I'm reading the New King James Version. So those are the ones that I've read. So when I try to memorize Bible verses, I memorized a lot of them in the ESV. So when people say this verse said this, I've read like 3 or 4 different versions just in the past 3 years. So I have a hard time separating the fact that I'm a flawed human being and I could get it wrong. So I don't know. I mean, for the most part, the changes that are said to be made in the KJV don't seem like they are meaning changing. It's definitely weird. Definitely weird. And I think it's something to maybe keep an eye out for. I guess it's kind of dangerous because we don't really want something to change so dramatically that it does affect us to start. But I mean, to wait for it to be a big deal. But I don't know what to do with it. Like what? Like so? What should like? Let's just say for sure that the Mandela effect is real. What do we do with that? Is there an answer to that question? I guess we'd have to say, okay, if it's real, if we all just to say right now, if it's real, we got to figure out why it's happening, how it's happening, right? So Jason Jack says the millennial, the me hasn't changed. The KJV. Was ME mean? Oh, the Mandela effect hasn't changed the KJV. Okay, well, I know like Ceiling Fan Man. I think the Awakened Saint. I saw him pop in the chat. They are sure that it's changed. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it has, but I think that it's really interesting concept. I'm going to just say this on this, and then I'm going to have to bounce off. But I think the really interesting part about the Mandela effect is, of course, to me personally, is Marvel comic movies. I think it's really interesting in that movie Endgame. It's all about them going back in time, right? And changing things. But what they say is when you go back in time, there's alternate timelines and the timeline starts to split. So you can kind of change things, but it alters things in kind of a funny way, right? Like that it's not like Back to the Future where you can go back in time, you change something in the past, and then when you go back to the future, you go back to the future, that everybody has changed based on your changes of the past. So what it was saying in the Endgame movie, the Infinite, Avengers Endgame, it was saying that if you change something in the past, that people's current consciousness would still be the same. So you could change things in the past and the things around them would be changed, but they would still have the same memory and the same thought process. I think that that is what they're talking about the Mandela effect. So like if you like if somebody if it was possible, if somebody could go back and change things, like you would remain the same. And then when you just walk out and everything would be different, and you'd be like, what is going on? That is what that movie's describing. That's the Mandela effect. But what I think is really interesting about that is that that relates to how people talk about CERN. Because in those Marvel movies, it's them going back using Ant-Man technology. They're going into the quantum realm. They're going into this quantum, like this like atomic level, like so small, and that's somehow where time works differently. And through that, they are changing time, right? That's what they're doing well. That's what they purport to do at CERN. Is they're smashing these quantum level atoms or whatever they're doing there, and that is what Mandela effect theorists claim. It's the origination of this craziness is at CERN. Now, what's also interesting is that CERN is not the only hadron collider. So that's what they're doing. They're smashing these things together and they're breaking these things apart to try to find the God particle, supposedly. CERN is just the biggest hadron collider. There's actually lots of them. Did you guys know that? CERN is not the only one. So what if they're learning how to do some of that stuff? What's really interesting about that whole theory is that my conclusion has been is that you have these Marvel movies that are definitely telling a Gnostic story. And what I find interesting is that you have Thanos' character. One of my most famous reels was I was saying, did Disney and Marvel make our God the bad guy? So if you kind of look, you see all the similarities between Thanos and Jesus or Yahweh, our God, however you want to say it. I mean, Yahweh, Jesus being the same thing. But the way he's presented, Thanos shows up. He's the most powerful being in the universe. And his goal is to snap his fingers and make half of humanity, half of the universe disappear out of thin air. I think it's really interesting. When he shows up, he gives this big long speech and he says, Destiny arrives all the same. And now it's here. Or should I say, I am? And so in the next movie, he shows up and says, I am inevitable. Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. That's what the burning bush says. My name is I am that I am. That's the translation of that. That's where you get Yahweh from. So I believe that Thanos in that movie is showing that he's Jesus. That's how they're presenting Jesus. He's coming in judgment. His ship is called the Sanctuary. After he defeats the good guys, his goal is to go to a garden to rest on a grateful universe. He also gets the soul stone by sacrificing his favorite child. Even he has this speech by I think the one guy, it's kind of his priestly character going before him, named Dumas, I think. I think that's his name. He's given this speech to these people saying like that you think this is suffering, but no, it is salvation. Even in death, you guys are becoming children of Thanos. Oh my gosh, it's so on the nose. So that being said, Endgame is obviously the follow-up to this movie, but the way that Infinity War ends, there's this battle under a dome at the end. Thanos wins. You could almost consider that battle at the very end in Wakanda. It's like the Battle of Armageddon. The bad guy wins. The superheroes lose. He snaps his fingers and it all happens. So you could almost look at like that as Armageddon. So then you have Endgame, and it can't be undone. What happened. So it's kind of like at the end of that, what you have is you have like this Antichrist character, it's Tony Stark, and what you also have is they can't undo what he did without going back and changing some of the past. And that's when they get into the quantum realm. And then even at the end of that movie, Thanos says, I thought if I wiped out half of humanity, that the other half would be grateful. But what he says is, but this time I'm going to wipe everyone out and I'm going to start over from scratch. I think that is exactly what it's saying, like in the book of Revelation. It's like, so after Gog Magog, there's a new heaven and new earth. It's start over from scratch. I think it's really interesting that, yeah, could that be what the devil's plan is? Is that what they were presenting? That Armageddon had already happened because Infinity War happened. And now we're in the end game here. The end game being Satan's little season. Is that crazy? Let's just say this. We know that the devil can only do what God allows him to do. So if God allowed him to manipulate time, take time away, right? Or add time to our timeline. Well, we all believe that happened, right? They added 1,000 years. or added 700 years, how many years it did. But what if part of this Mandela effect was, even if it's not in the way that we're seeing as kind of some supernatural sciencey thing, what if it was just them destroying our old history, changing things in order to deceive everyone? So if God allowed the devil to deceive everyone, how would he let him do it? I mean, if it's possible, then the devil's doing it. And I do believe if it's true, the devil's behind it. What do you guys think? Oh yeah, well, you know what's funny is that I mean, I liked watching the good guys get killed in Infinity War. I like Thanos better. And now I feel justified for liking Thanos better than Thor. Thor's the good guy of that movie, and he was the prideful son of a god who got cast out of heaven and fell like lightning to earth. And then he took a earthly girlfriend, right? He's clearly portrayed as the good guy, but he's like the devil himself. And wouldn't it just be? And wouldn't it just be that they would turn the ultimate bad guy into the ultimate good guy, and they would turn the ultimate good guy into the ultimate bad guy? That is how Gnostic Hollywood does things. And when you can see it, you can't unsee it. But yeah, I wonder. I do wonder if that's what that movie was trying to display. Because if you think about it, if you really think about it, time travel plots are stupid. They're so lame. Back to the Future was fun. The Terminator was fun. Most time travel plots are overly convoluted. They don't make any sense if you think about them for 5 seconds. And that's kind of a lame way to wrap that whole, you know, whatever they called it, whatever the phase one of the Marvel universe. That was a very lame way to end it. What if they ended it like that because that was reality? What do you guys think? Okay, JT, I hope you make a TikTok video on this. You kind of have to now since your wife asked about it. Do I have to? I might have to. Maybe I'll just condense that because that's what I do now. I just condense what I said on the live stream. I just say it anymore. I just cut out all the ums and the likes and the try to make it succinct. And then I just put some music on it and I put some captions and some pictures. Maybe I'll just do that. Oh yeah, but anyways, guys, that's it for this evening. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Obviously, if you guys were looking to see more from Jenny Mire and Lori from Remnant Rising, I'll try to add some links to the description so you guys can check that out. Once again, I said I teased an idea of maybe doing a health and wellness podcast only on the audio only. So if you guys do not subscribe to me on Spotify or Apple, please do, because at this point, it will probably only be for the audio only podcast. And obviously, we're going to talk more about, like, obviously the health and wellness stuff. So we're going to talk about Modern Roots Life, the sponsor of JT's mixtape and all that stuff. So if you guys are interested in that, please let me know. Like, leave a comment in thank you, Saved by Jesus 2221. Yeah, if you guys want to see that, please leave a comment after this ends, not in the chat, because I'll check out like a demand for this. It'll probably happen anyways, but if you guys want that. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with it. I appreciate all y'all super chats. You guys are too good to me. I appreciate you guys. God bless y'all. Thank you, Clay D. You're the man, Clay D. Yeah, you guys are so awesome. But yeah, I think that was all I was gonna say. But yeah, if you guys got any comments about questions for future, next time again, I'm gonna try to do that trick where I post in my comment, my community post. And so if I didn't answer any of your questions today, maybe I'll just try to leave an up and running of like questions for JT. So if I do a live stream in the future, I can go revisit that list. But if it gets real long, it might get overwhelming. But maybe I'll do that anyways. But I appreciate you guys. I am so blessed to be with you guys. And obviously, I really appreciate all your support and your prayers. Continue to pray for me as I try to make this leap to doing this full time. I would really appreciate that. I appreciate all you guys do for me. And I hope to do more for you guys here soon. So, love you guys. God bless.